There comes a moment in the life of every empath when they finally see it. The truth they've been too kind, too patient, too forgiving to acknowledge. The truth that being nice has become their cage. That their compassion has turned into currency for the unworthy. That their gentleness has been weaponized against them by people who saw light not as a blessing, but as a resource to exploit. And in that moment, something ancient stirs inside them, a kind of clarity that burns hotter than any anger ever could. The empath who thinks like an INFJ or INTJ does not explode. They do not lash out. They evolve. Because while most people think empathy is softness, they understand that true empathy is power, but only when it's protected by intellect, vision, and discernment. They begin to see the architecture of human behavior with the same precision that Machiavelli saw in politics or Jung saw in the psyche. They notice the unspoken motives beneath kindness, the manipulation hidden in flattery, the insecurity disguised as confidence. They see everything not through cynicism but through truth. And truth is not gentle. It is surgical. It cuts away illusion. Empaths who think like INFJs or INTJs stop confusing compassion with compliance. They stop giving endless chances to people who mistake forgiveness for permission. They stop allowing chaos to call itself love, because they finally realize you cannot heal what feeds on your energy. There's a danger in being kind without boundaries. It turns love into servitude and empathy into exhaustion. The empath who has awakened knows this now. They no longer offer warmth to those who bring only cold. They no longer hand out understanding to those who weaponize it. They've learned that the world is not divided into good and evil, but into the conscious and the unconscious, those who know what they do and those who hide behind ignorance. And the empath's mistake was believing that everyone feels like they do, that everyone means what they say, that everyone deep down wants to grow, but they don't. Some people want comfort, not change. Some want validation, not reflection. Some want your light only because it distracts them from their own darkness. And so the empath begins a sacred withdrawal, not from love, but from illusion. They no longer offer themselves to everyone. They stop explaining their worth. They stop bleeding for those who refuse to stop stabbing. Because they've realized something profound. If you keep feeding people who drain you, you are not kind, you are complicit. This is the transformation when the empath stops being nice and starts being clear. Nice is performative. Nice is what you do to keep the peace while destroying your own. Nice is how you silence your intuition to avoid rejection. But clarity is divine. Clarity says no without guilt. Clarity ends conversations that go nowhere. Clarity knows when silence is louder than explanation. This is the birth of the untouchable empath. They are no longer led by emotion alone, but by calibrated awareness. Their empathy has merged with logic, heart, and mind in perfect alignment. They now love with precision. They now give with strategy. They now protect their energy like a sovereign guards a kingdom. This is not coldness. It is control. Because what makes an empath powerful is not their capacity to feel. It's their ability to discern which feelings are theirs and which have been implanted by others. The INTJ and INFJ archetypes understand this instinctively. They can walk into a room and feel the temperature of the truth before anyone speaks. They can sense what is hidden, the power plays, the insecurities, the masks. They no longer absorb that energy. They observe it. They no longer try to fix it. They decode it. That shift from absorption to observation is the turning point. It's the difference between being a sponge and being a mirror, because mirrors reflect truth, and truth, once revealed, cannot be controlled. When an empath reaches this level, manipulation dies upon contact. Guilt loses its grip. Narcissists, energy leeches, and emotional chaos can no longer find entry points because the empath no longer provides them. They have mastered what Carl Jung called individuation, the process of becoming whole, integrating both the light and the dark, the gentle and the ruthless, the compassionate and the calculating, because what the world doesn't tell you is that wholeness requires shadow. Empaths who refuse to embrace their shadow remain enslaved by it. They attract chaos because they refuse to set boundaries. They get hurt because they confuse patience with loyalty. They drown in other people's pain because they believe self-sacrifice is virtue. But when the empath integrates their shadow, when they stop fearing their own strength, their own coldness, their own fire, they become unstoppable. They realize they can be kind and commanding, empathic and unapologetic, loving and logical. They no longer need to prove their goodness because they have nothing left to prove. The awakened empath is no longer interested in being liked. They are interested in being effective. They can listen without absorbing. They can care without collapsing. They can love without losing themselves. This is where the INFJ and INTJ archetypes merge into something transcendent: empathy fused with vision, feeling fused with strategy. They do not waste words. They do not chase. They do not argue. They simply act. And their actions carry weight because they come from alignment, not emotion. People will call them cold, detached, intimidating, but what they are is centered. They are operating from clarity, and clarity terrifies those who live off confusion, because when you are clear, you cannot be manipulated. When you are grounded, you cannot be swayed. When you are self-aware, you cannot be used. The empath who thinks like an INTJ or INFJ becomes what Jung might call the master of their own fate, one who no longer projects their pain onto others, nor allows others to project onto them. They become the observer of the collective unconscious, not a victim of it. They can see the architecture of influence, the design of human nature, the subtle movements of emotion beneath behavior. And they use that vision not to control, but to create. Because true mastery is not about dominating others, it's about transcending the need to. The awakened empath now walks with a calm that unsettles those addicted to chaos. Their peace feels like rejection to those who mistake drama for connection. Their silence feels like punishment to those who confuse attention with love. But the empath no longer explains. They know that explanation is wasted on those who benefit from misunderstanding you. They no longer argue about intentions. They let behavior reveal the truth. They no longer give chances out of hope. They give space out of wisdom, because they've learned that walking away is not cruelty, it's clarity. The empath's greatest weapon is now their absence. Their greatest act of love is distance. Their greatest form of forgiveness is detachment. They no longer fight for closure, they are the closure. And from this place they become something almost mythic: the peaceful warrior, the philosopher of energy, the strategist of emotion. They no longer pour their light into every open hand. They offer it only where it will ignite growth. They've become selective not because they're superior, but because they finally understand the cost of their own energy. When you can feel everything, you must learn to choose what you allow in. And so they build their life around alignment, not attachment. They do not chase validation. They cultivate inner equilibrium. They do not seek permission. They act from intuition. They can stand alone for years if they must, because solitude no longer scares them, it strengthens them. And that's when they become untouchable, not because they've built walls, but because they've built standards. Not because they've stopped caring, but because they've stopped caring recklessly. They've transcended the illusion that empathy requires suffering. They've realized that compassion without self-respect is a slow form of self-destruction. Now, when they give, it's from overflow, not depletion. Now, when they love, it's from freedom, not fear. Now, when they help, it's from clarity, not compulsion. They've learned that boundaries are not barriers. They are invitations for real connection. Because only those who can respect your limits are capable of loving your depth. And once they understand that, they never go back. They no longer chase those who misunderstand them. They no longer dilute their truth for acceptance. They no longer seek peace through pleasing. They have found the rarest kind of peace, the peace that comes from alignment with their own integrity. This is the empath transformed. No longer the healer who forgets to heal themselves. No longer the giver who gives until empty. No longer the listener who silences their own voice. They are balanced now, heart and mind, shadow and light, love and logic in perfect, sovereign unity. And when you reach that state, something extraordinary happens. The world begins to respond differently. People treat you with more respect because your energy demands it. Opportunities align effortlessly because you've stopped chasing what doesn't fit. Your intuition sharpens because it no longer fights the noise of self-doubt. You start to create instead of react. You start to attract instead of chase. You start to live instead of survive. This is the power of the empath, who thinks like an INTJ or INFJ, the one who has stopped being nice and started being true. They are no longer the emotional servant of others' chaos. They are the architect of their own peace. And that peace is power, quiet, stable, unshakable. The kind of power that doesn't need to control. The kind of power that cannot be manipulated. The kind of power that, once reached, makes you truly untouchable. Because when your heart and your mind finally speak the same language, no one can use one against the other. You become the equilibrium in a world built on extremes. And that, finally, is the highest evolution of empathy, to feel deeply, see clearly, and walk away fearlessly. You are no longer nice. You are necessary. And that is everything. And when you reach that point, when your heart has become wise and your mind has become kind, you stop moving through the world as prey and start walking as presence. You no longer ask for permission to exist in peace. You are peace. You no longer seek approval for being empathetic yet logical, compassionate yet discerning. You stand as proof that the two can coexist, that feeling deeply does not mean thinking blindly. You become the paradox the world cannot categorize. Too calm to be manipulated, too self-aware to be deceived, too detached to be controlled. Because you have finally understood the ancient law. The moment you stop needing anything from anyone, you become untouchable. Not untouchable in the sense of isolation, but in the sense of inner sovereignty. Your emotions no longer belong to external events. Your energy no longer bends to the moods of others. You still feel everything, but you choose what deserves your response. That is what makes the awakened empath dangerous. In the best way, they have the power to see into you, but no longer the need to fix you. They can witness your darkness without absorbing it, see your manipulation without reacting to it, hear your lies without losing their center. They have seen the shadow of humanity and made peace with it in others and in themselves. Because that is the great paradox of empathy. You cannot truly understand others until you have faced your own shadow. Before awakening, the empath tries to heal others to avoid confronting their own pain. After awakening, they heal themselves, and that self-healing becomes their greatest gift to the world. They begin to realize that compassion without consciousness is exploitation waiting to happen. That love without self-awareness becomes martyrdom. That endless forgiveness is not grace, it's self-erasure. So they stop confusing self-sacrifice with virtue. They stop measuring goodness by how much they endure. They stop bending to fit into the narratives of those who fear growth. They stop being the emotional landfill for other people's chaos. And something magnificent happens. Their energy rises. It's not just spiritual, it's visible. People can feel it. They sense a new gravity around them, a stillness that cannot be shaken, a presence that demands truth. The same people who once used their kindness now feel uneasy around them, not because they've become cruel, but because they've become clear. Clarity is terrifying to those who rely on confusion. You can see it in their reactions, the way manipulative people start to stumble over their own words, the way emotional vampires suddenly lose interest, The way attention seekers find their theatrics met with silence instead of sympathy. Because the awakened empath has learned the secret language of energy silence. Silence is their armor. Silence is their mirror. Silence is the space where falsehood dies. They no longer defend themselves with explanations. They defend themselves with absence. They no longer argue, they observe. They no longer chase, they choose. They understand that silence is not passive. It is power refined to its purest form. And in that silence, they start to build. They build empires of focus. They build art born of truth, not pain. They build lives that reflect clarity instead of chaos. They use every betrayal as blueprint, every disappointment as design, every heartbreak as architecture. Because empaths who think like INFJs or INTJs don't just recover, they reconstruct. They analyze where they ignored their intuition, where they compromised their standards, where they abandoned themselves to keep peace, and then they never do it again. They emerge from that reconstruction phase unrecognizable. Not harder, but wiser. Not colder, but calmer. Not guarded, but guided. And when the world meets them again, it doesn't know what to do with them, because they are no longer readable in the same way. You can't provoke them. You can't flatter them. You can't guilt them. Their buttons have been dismantled. Their energy is sealed. Their empathy is now a conscious choice, not a reflex. This is the final form of the empath, the philosopher of emotion, the warrior of peace, the strategist of the soul. They can love you and leave you if you threaten their peace. They can forgive you without ever speaking to you again. They can understand your pain without allowing it to poison their joy. They live by the highest form of emotional intelligence, detached compassion. Detached compassion is not cold. It's sacred discipline. It's the ability to love without losing alignment. It's the wisdom to help without self-destruction. And this wisdom changes everything, how they move, how they speak, how they choose. They stop over-explaining, because truth no longer needs an audience. They stop over-giving, because worth no longer feels like a transaction. They stop apologizing for boundaries, because boundaries are now an act of love, not defense. Their relationships transform too. They attract those who match their frequency, not those who test it. They connect with people who bring peace, not adrenaline. Conversations become sacred, connections become mutual, love becomes quiet. And for the first time, they are not drained by intimacy, they are energized by it, because they are finally surrounded by equals. Empaths who think like INTJs and INFJs know this balance is not luck. It's design. It's the direct result of radical self-respect. They have built a filter between their empathy and the world, not to block emotion, but to preserve clarity. That filter is their intuition, sharpened, trained, flawless. It warns them before betrayal even begins. It whispers truth before deception fully forms. It guides them away from confusion long before pain arrives. And now, when they walk away, they don't do it from exhaustion, they do it from certainty. They no longer need closure, because they are the closure. They no longer need understanding, because they understand themselves. And when they leave, they do not slam doors, they vanish through them, effortlessly, completely. Their absence becomes their statement. Their peace becomes their proof. That's when they become what Jung described as the individuated soul, one who is no longer ruled by unconscious forces, but guided by awareness. The world will not understand this kind of person. It will call them distant when they are simply self-contained. It will call them cold when they are simply in control. It will call them intimidating when they are simply unshakable. But they will not explain, because they have no need to. They know that explanation is often an offering to those who only came to misunderstand. So they stay silent, not as retreat, but as reign, because silence now is their throne. And from that throne, They rule their own energy like an empire, disciplined, intentional, sovereign. They give only where there is reciprocity. They listen only where there is authenticity. They love only where there is respect. This is what it means to stop being nice and become untouchable. It is not a mask. It is the unveiling of the true self. It is not arrogance. It is alignment. It is not isolation. It is elevation. The empath who once drowned in other people's emotions now walks above the flood, not because they escaped the water, but because they learned how to breathe within it. And when they look back on their old self, the one who gave endlessly, apologized unnecessarily, explained tirelessly, they do not feel regret. They feel reverence, because that version of them was necessary. That version carried the lessons that became wisdom, the pain that became power, the confusion that became clarity. They had to feel everything to finally see everything. And now they do. They see patterns before they repeat. They see motives before they're revealed. They see truth before it's spoken. And that sight, that piercing prophetic awareness is their gift. They no longer use it to fix others. They use it to guide themselves. They have become their own compass, their own healer, their own home. And in a world full of noise, that makes them rare. In a world addicted to validation, that makes them powerful. In a world afraid of truth, that makes them untouchable. Because they've learned what few ever will, that the path to invincibility was never about hardening the heart. It was about aligning it with the mind. It was about mastering emotion, not muting it. It was about becoming aware enough to feel everything, yet wise enough to choose what to absorb. That is what makes the empath who thinks like an INFJ or INTJ a force unlike any other, the perfect balance of logic and love, intuition and intention, light and shadow. They are no longer the ones being drained by the world. They are the ones redefining it. And now when they walk, they do not step lightly. They walk as if the earth itself recognizes them, because it does. The world always bows to those who move in truth. And these souls, these empathic strategists, these emotional alchemists have become truth incarnate. They have stopped being nice. They have started being real. And in that reality, they have become what every manipulator, every narcissist, every illusion fears the most: a heart that feels deeply, a mind that sees clearly, a soul that cannot be touched. And when that kind of soul finally emerges balanced between depth and discipline, intuition and intellect, the entire world begins to respond differently. Not because the world has changed, but because they have. Their frequency has shifted. Their energy no longer begs, it commands. It doesn't chase, it attracts. It doesn't explain, it radiates. The empath who once bent under the weight of everyone else's emotions now moves like water through fire, unburned, unbothered, unstoppable. They have learned the greatest secret of all. Peace is not given. It is built. It is engineered through boundaries, maintained through discipline, and fueled by self-respect. Once, they were open books, bleeding truth onto every page for others to read. Now, they've become sacred texts written in a language only those who have earned their presence can understand. You see, when an empath fuses with the mindset of an INTJ or INFJ, they transcend the ordinary realm of sensitivity. They evolve into something rarer, the aware empath, the strategist of energy, the guardian of meaning. They no longer love blindly. They love intelligently. They no longer give instinctively. They give intentionally. Their kindness is no longer an invitation, it's a mirror, a reflection that exposes those who come near. The manipulator feels uneasy in their calm. The narcissist feels unseen in their gaze. The liar feels naked in their silence. Because these empaths no longer offer comfort to delusion, they offer truth. And truth is the one thing the false cannot stand. And as they walk through life, they notice a pattern. The noise of the world no longer reaches them. The chaos that once pulled at their emotions now feels distant, irrelevant, powerless. They've built a boundary so spiritual, so silent, that only authenticity can cross it. It's not something they announce. It's something you feel when you're near them, an unshakable presence that demands truth without words. This is the empath who has mastered emotional sovereignty. They no longer absorb energy. They transmute it. They take pain and turn it into purpose. They take rejection and turn it into redirection. They take betrayal and turn it into blueprint. Their intuition no longer overwhelms them, it informs them. Their emotions no longer drown them, they guide them. Their love no longer depletes them, it expands them. They've reached the state Jung described as the union of opposites, where shadow and light coexist without conflict, because they no longer fear their darkness. They've befriended it. They've integrated it. They've learned that compassion without the shadow becomes weakness, and intellect without the heart becomes tyranny. But together, they become mastery. They now see manipulation as data, not danger. They see rejection as redirection. They see pain as initiation. The same pain that once broke them is now the language through which they read the world. They have become fluent in the energy beneath words, fluent in silence, fluent in truth. And this fluency makes them nearly impossible to deceive. Because what can you take from someone who no longer fears loss? What can you manipulate in someone who no longer needs approval? What can you control in someone who has mastered detachment without disconnection? You cannot touch what has already accepted itself. You cannot wound what has turned its scars into armor. You cannot weaken what no longer resists its own strength. This is the stage where the empath becomes a force, not the kind of force that dominates, but the kind that stabilizes. They don't rise above others, they rise beyond illusion. You'll see it in their eyes, calm, unreadable, ancient, the kind of eyes that have seen the worst of humanity and chosen not to harden, the kind of eyes that make you question your own authenticity when they look at you. They have nothing to prove, yet their very presence proves everything. Because when a person becomes whole, they begin to emit something, a frequency that is both magnetic and unsettling. It's what ancient mystics called divine authority. It's not charisma, it's not charm, it's something deeper, the resonance of truth. And truth cannot be performed. It can only be embodied. So they embody it, quietly, powerfully, relentlessly. They walk differently now, not fast, but certain, not loud, but unwavering. They no longer explain why they left, why they changed, why they grew. The explanation is in the results, in the peace that follows them, the opportunities that align with them, the people who rise to meet them. Those who can't match their vibration fall away naturally, not through confrontation, but through incompatibility, because light no longer fights darkness, it simply reveals it. And the empath who has become untouchable no longer fights people, they reveal them. They reveal manipulation through silence. They reveal authenticity through consistency. They reveal truth through stillness. And this revelation terrifies those who live off illusion, because you cannot lie to someone who listens beyond words. You cannot fool someone who sees your energy before your face. You cannot exploit someone who no longer needs anything from you. That is the apex of empathy awareness without attachment. And from this awareness, they begin to shape their life not as reaction, but as design. They no longer wait for peace. They engineer it. They no longer hope for love. They embody it. They no longer search for purpose. They live it. Every decision becomes intentional. Every no becomes sacred. Every silence becomes art. And the beauty of it all, they don't even need to be understood anymore. Understanding has become irrelevant because they now know that truth exists whether it's recognized or not. They are no longer defined by perception. They are defined by alignment. They no longer seek to be seen. They seek to see. Because vision, true spiritual vision, is not about looking outward. It's about perceiving inwardly with such clarity that illusion dissolves on contact. And when you live like that, you become what few ever reach consciousness in human form. You are the eye that sees through deception, the heart that loves without dependency, the mind that moves without fear. That's why the empath who thinks like an INFJ or INTJ becomes untouchable, because they have balanced heaven and hell within themselves. They've embraced their darkness without drowning in it. They've embodied their light without blinding themselves. They've become what Jung meant by the self, not the ego, not the mask, but the totality. And once you become the totality, the wholeness that no longer seeks halves, no one can take from you again. No one can use your kindness as weakness. No one can twist your love into leverage. No one can lure you back into chaos, because you now move from a higher order, the order of clarity, of awareness, of inner law. You have become a system unto yourself, and that is the quiet revolution of the awakened empath. They stop living as reflections of the world. They start living as revelations to it. They stop mirroring others. They start mirroring truth. And everywhere they go, the false trembles, the inauthentic flees, the aligned rise. Because when you carry both empathy and intellect, heart and precision, love and logic, you become evolution in human form. You stop needing protection, because your consciousness is protection. You stop needing validation, because truth is its own validation. You stop needing power, because awareness is the highest form of it. You are no longer nice. You are necessary, no longer fragile. You are focused, no longer selfless. You are self-realized. And in that realization, you finally understand being untouchable was never about walls. It was about wisdom. You have not become cold. You have become conscious. You have not stopped feeling. You have started seeing. And when you can see clearly, nothing outside of you can shake what lives within you. Because you have entered the rarest state of all emotional sovereignty. And from that state, you no longer live reacting to life. You live creating it, unbothered, unbreakable, unmistakably awake. And when they finally reach that level of awakening, that untouchable equilibrium between compassion and clarity as silence descends, not the kind of silence born of emptiness, but the kind born of completion, the kind that no longer needs to prove, to fight, to explain, or to be understood. They have become the calm within the storm, the still point around which chaos dissolves. Their energy no longer fluctuates with the noise of others. They've become steady, deliberate, immovable. And that stillness, that unwavering serenity, is the final evolution of an empath who has learned to think like an INFJ or INTJ. They've transcended the old archetype of the wounded healer. They've transformed into the conscious creator, the one who does not fix others, but awakens them simply by existing. Their very presence becomes a kind of mirror, not one that reflects the mask, but the essence. People feel truth around them, even when no words are spoken. And truth, by its nature, unsettles before it liberates. Because this empath no longer operates on the frequency of need. They move on the wavelength of knowing. They no longer enter rooms asking, "Who can I help?" but rather, "What is aligned here?" They no longer absorb energy unconsciously. They choose their resonance intentionally. They are not reactive. They are responsive. They have mastered what Jung called the integration of opposites, love and discernment, heart and logic, light and shadow, all held within one consciousness. That's why they can forgive without re-entry. That's why they can love without losing power. That's why they can see without judgment. Because they've learned that forgiveness is not a doorway, it's closure. That love is not surrender, it's awareness. That seeing clearly is not cruelty, it's mercy. And that awareness makes them untouchable, not because they've risen above humanity, but because they've descended fully into it, into its patterns, illusions, and truths, and come out the other side whole. The world feels different to them now. No more games, no more pretending, no more emotional debts disguised as love. They no longer confuse chaos for passion. They no longer call overextension kindness. They no longer let guilt be the currency of connection. They have redefined everything not from theory, but from experience. Because once you've been drained by illusion, you start craving authenticity like oxygen. And once you've found it within yourself, you stop searching for it anywhere else. They now live from that sacred self-sufficiency, not detached, but centered. Not cynical, but clear. Not arrogant, but awake. The empath who once apologized for being too much now moves through life with quiet precision. They speak only when the words carry truth. They give only when the energy reciprocates. They love only when the connection evolves both souls. Everything else dissolves quietly in their absence. They don't need revenge. They don't need validation. They don't even need closure, because they've become the embodiment of all three. Their peace is revenge. Their alignment is validation. Their silence is closure. And that is the final form of mastery. When your heart is open but your energy is guarded. When your mind is sharp but your spirit remains soft. When your empathy flows freely but never uncontrollably. You become both sanctuary and sword. Gentle but not accessible to everyone. Loving but never naive. Present but never absorbed. You can walk into darkness without losing light because you have learned to generate your own. That's what it means to be an empath who has stopped being nice. It means you no longer give your energy to appease the insecure. You no longer water relationships that grow weeds instead of roots. You no longer bleed to prove your heart still beats. You live now from truth, and truth needs no performance. You have become self-contained illumination, and that illumination is your freedom. No one can use it. No one can dim it. No one can define it, because it was never theirs to begin with. So you move forward quietly, steadily, sovereignly. The same heart, but wiser. The same light, but refined. The same empathy, but now armed with awareness. And when people look at you, they'll wonder how you do it, how you stay so calm, so clear, so composed in a world built to provoke reaction. They won't understand that your peace was purchased by pain, that every wound became a doorway, every heartbreak a lesson, every loss a realignment. You didn't escape the storm. You became its eye, and now you live from that stillness, untouchable, unbreakable, undeniable, because you no longer chase light. You are light, the kind of light that doesn't ask to be seen, the kind of light that reveals, the kind of light that cannot be extinguished. And that is the end of the old empath, the death of the one who bled to be loved, and the birth of the one who burns to illuminate. They have stopped being nice. They have started being true. And in that truth, they have become the rarest thing of all, a soul that feels deeply, a mind that sees clearly, and a presence that cannot be touched.